bariatric surgery, gastric bypass, lap band surgery, and weight loss surgery. They all mean the same thing. Your life is about to change. That's the topic on this edition of Healthy Living. Stay with us. The statistics for obesity in the United States are overwhelming. Kentucky is ranked 4th in the country for obesity. That means 1 in 4 people in our state is considered obese. We're going to be talking about surgery that can help you to remedy this situation. And here to talk with me is Dr. Alex Argotte, general surgeon with a specialty in gastric bypass surgery here in town. Thank you, Dr. Argotte, for joining me.
You're welcome.
I want to start out just talking a little bit about your background and what brought you to Paducah.
Well, I'm a general surgeon, originally from Long Island, New York. And back about 5-6 years ago, they needed a surgeon desperately in West Kentucky. So I was brought here for those reasons only, and I was looking to change where I was practicing medicine, looking for more of a different climate and a different environment. So here I am.
Here you are. And you have a specialty in weight loss surgery, and all those terms that I mentioned in the open, bariatric, gastric bypass, all of those mean the same thing?
Yes, all the surgeries for weight loss surgery are categorized in one category, which is bariatric surgery.
Okay. So what is, we'll just call it weight loss surgery from here on out because there are different types of weight loss surgery.
That is correct.
But what is weight loss surgery as an overall definition?
Weight loss surgery is considered a tool or a method to get patients to lose weight where other modalities such as dieting and exercising or even medications were unsuccessful in achieving a weight loss or sustaining that weight loss. And surgery provides patients with that type of tool to get to that point.
Now, I've heard a lot about this in the media in the last several years, but when did physicians actually start performing weight loss surgery?
Well, weight loss surgery has been around for over 50 years.
50 years.
Over 50 years.
I would not have thought that.
The gastric bypass has been around for 50 years. It's been modified in different ways, but it's still the same operation. There has been other type of weight loss surgeries before that, but we no longer do them. Today we have 3 different types that we can choose from. There is a type of surgery called malabsorption type surgery. You can basically categorize them into 3 categories.
Okay.
One is malabsorption.
Malabsorption meaning?
Meaning that we reroute the intestines in such a way, not so much limit what you can eat, to some degree, but not a whole lot, but we rearrange them in such a way that you can digest or absorb a lot of calories from the food that you're eating.
Okay.
And basically we call it a biliopancreatic diversion. There is a restrictive type surgery, which the most common one that people would always talk about is the gastric stapling.
Okay.
And we hardly do that operation today, but that's a restrictive surgery where you limit the quantity of food that someone can eat.
So their stomach, you actually make it smaller.
Smaller. You make it into a tiny pouch, and that is in your stomach. The newer version of that is called a lap band, which has been around for about a decade. It's been around more commonly abroad in other parts of the world than it is in this country. And then you have the third type of weight loss surgery is the hybrid of the two, which has a malabsorption component, but it also has a restrictive component, and that is the gastric bypass.
Okay, and is that one more common, that you do gastric bypass in this country?
Gastric bypass surgery is the most common operation that's being performed in this country.
Okay, and we're going to talk about we talked about the differences, that one is the malabsorption, and so you say that you reroute and so it doesn't absorb the calories.
Correct.
But what happens to all the other things in the food that we need, like vitamins and minerals and nutrients? What happens to all of that? Do they also bypass?
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
There are certain parts of the intestines that are more involved in absorbing certain types of nutrients or minerals. When you rearrange the intestines around, you can still absorb those minerals or vitamins. It's just that they have to be given a supplementation to make up for what the body is not having a difficult time absorbing now. So the patients can still absorb those things. It's just that they have to take supplements and have to closely be monitored.
Okay, so you give them vitamins and over the counter so that they can have those that their body needing.
Correct. And that's where it's vital, it's critical to anyone who does weight loss surgery. You have to work very closely with a dietitian.
Okay, so that's really very important.
That's very important because she will help you and guide you along the way in conjunction with the surgeon. In our program, we have a dietitian and myself who work very closely to assure that the patients are given the right amount of proteins, the right amount of vitamins, the minerals that they need so they don't have any trouble.
So in the gastric bypass, you said it's a combination of those other two.
Yes.
And that it's malabsorption, it bypasses, but it's also restrictive.
That is correct.
So they can have certain things to eat or certain amounts. They're not hungry as much before?
Basically what we do is that we create a small pouch out of your stomach. By using the very proximal part of your stomach, we make it into a tiny pouch. This is your new stomach. So when it is full, and it's about the size of an egg. So when it is full, you're full, you don't have the hunger, you're not really hungry because it's the same thing as if you had your normal stomach and you ate a large meal. Once it's full, you're done eating and you're no longer hungry. But here, your new stomach is the size of an egg. Okay. So it's the same principle, so patients don't eat as much, subsequently they're not absorbing a lot of calories.
Dr. Argotte, I have a graph here that I found online that compares the two surgeries that seem to be the most prevalent that I found online anyway, the gastric bypass and the lap band. And by comparison of these, some of the things are that the gastric bypass more complex, dealing with actually cutting part of your stomach, versus the simpler operation of the lap band of just putting a band around the stomach. Now, explain that just for a second, how the lap band actually works.
The lap band, as I mentioned to you before, is a restrictive operation. So what we want to do, the bottom line comes down to we're consuming more calories than we're able to burn off. So what we want to do is we want to limit how much food or how much calories a person can eat anytime they have the urge to eat or they have a meal. The lap band, we wrap this band apparatus around the proximal part of the stomach. So when we tighten it and squeeze on it, it creates a small pouch out of your stomach. And it also creates a small opening for the food to get through.
Okay.
Subsequently, when the pouch gets full with food, which is about the size of an egg, the food will stay there for a little while and slowly works its way through that small opening to let things get down into the rest of their stomach.
So it seems less invasive than actually cutting to make the pouch smaller.
Exactly.
Okay.
It is a lot less invasive than it is than when you compare it to a gastric bypass.
Okay. And some of the other things, it's that the gastric bypass is not reversible. The lap band is. The gastric bypass is more expensive versus less expensive just to put the band in. There are some good things here for gastric bypass. I want to throw those in. that the weight loss is faster versus the lap band, and there's there's no significant hardware in the body that once you're done with the gastric bypass, that's it, versus having that band that lives inside your body. So there are good and bad to both of those surgeries. But you said that we do mostly gastric bypass in the United States and they do lap band in other countries. If indeed that the lap band is less invasive and less risky, why do we do the gastric bypass more here?
I think there's a lot of different reasons why that's so. One of the reasons is that the FDA has not approved a lot of these band type of apparatus in this country until the 1990s or in the early 1990s. There are 4 companies that make band apparatus for weight loss surgery. In this country, the FDA has only approved 1.
Okay.
And unlike the rest of the world, we don't have enough data or any long-term data to see what the long-term success is of the lap band. We do have some data now, but nothing long-term. For those reasons is why it's still by a lot of insurance companies considered investigational. It's one of the downsides of the lap band today, especially in this country, is that most insurance companies do not pay for it because it's still considered investigational. The one company who does make it is trying to change it and present its data, although it's not over a 20-year period, it's only over a 10-year period, that it is an effective modality for weight loss surgery. So hopefully in the years to come, that may change, insurance companies may pay for it, and subsequently more surgeons will be able to do it more freely.
Well, you know, it seems strange. You know, we're the most powerful country in the world, and other countries are more advanced in that aspect of doing the less invasive surgery than we are. So I guess, you know, it's a little bothersome.
It is a little bothersome, but I guess you'll have to always ask why the FDA is there for. And I guess they want to make sure that patients are getting the proper care when using the proper hardware, because although the surgery is less invasive and it is less riskier, it does have its own complications by having a foreign body. And there are three components that I like to break it down into three components of the lap band.
Okay.
There's actually the belt type component of it, which wraps around your stomach, but then there is a tubing. There's a tubing, and that tubing is connected to what's called a port, which gets implanted into your belly wall. So when we adjust the band, because inside the belt, inside the inner surface of it, there is a chamber that you can fill with fluid.
Okay.
So you have to access the port by going through a needle.
Repeatedly. So it's not, when you put the band in, it may not be exactly big enough or small enough. Is that?
Right. Well, it's not so much as big or small enough. The band will stay there. It's injecting the fluid what will tighten it, because inside the fluid will fill up the chamber and squeeze down on the stomach.
Okay.
So they have to have constantly readjustments. And it's very critical that they do come back for follow-up in order to try to attempt an adequate weight loss from the surgery.
Is that laparoscopic, or is that actually opening you up to do that each time that you have to adjust that band?
No, the adjustment of it in order to make it tighter or looser, depending on how the patients are performing, is just an office visit.
Okay.
So that's not really an operation per se.
Okay. All right, so you have the one-time thing with the gastric bypass. They make your stomach the size of an egg the first time.
Correct.
And then with the lap band, you have to go in and make those adjustments.
Right. Now, that's yes and no.
Okay.
Because when we first put in the lap band, it's just there. It's just sort of like me putting a belt around your waist but not doing anything to it.
Okay.
So the first 6 weeks it's just there, but we haven't done anything to it because it could be a lot of swelling around it, so we need to wait for all of that to subside and slowly let patients adjust back to a regular diet because they're recovering from the recent surgery. Then after 6 weeks is when we first do our first adjustment.
Okay.
Now you just can't make it as tight as you can on the first visit because they may not be able to swallow anything.
Okay.
So we have to go slowly by injecting a little fluid, and a little fluid may be good enough for you, but it may not be good enough for someone else, and then we wait at least 4 weeks.
Okay, so it's with a needle with the fluid every few weeks or whatever to adjust that.
Every month.
So you can see how that would be cumbersome, and you would think, I don't want to have to go back every few weeks for that. I just want to have my surgery and be done with it.
That's something that patients need to be aware of, because the first year I require patients to come back every month, and we'll slow it down to every other month the second year, and then every 3 months after that. But it's a lifetime follow-up. And because it's a foreign body, you always need to make sure that things are functioning well. And you also want to make sure that they're getting an adequate weight loss. With the lap band, the weight loss is low. And it is possible that in the first 3 months, you could lose very little. And the weight loss expands over up to a 4-year period. And so it goes for quite some time. So patience is a big thing with the lap band. You have to be very patient because the weight loss is about 1 to 2 pounds a week.
Okay.
So, it is possible that in a year, you could lose only 30 pounds.
Okay.
But again, it will go on and on for up to 4 years.
Well, we'll talk about that a little bit in the second segment. We're going to take a break here in just a minute, talking about and leave you with some websites where you can find out some more of this information online. But and we're going to talk about what is a good candidate. How do you know you need gastric bypass surgery or lap band surgery? Bariatric surgery. That gets both of them, right?
That is correct.
Right. Well, stay with us. We'll be right back. Thank you for coming back with us. This is Healthy Living, and I'm your host, Tammy Thompson. And we're talking about weight loss surgery today, bariatric surgery. The way we've heard gastric bypass is one of, when I hear that word, those words, I know exactly what we're talking about. And here to discuss this with me and to continue the conversation is Dr. Alex Argotte, General Surgeon with a specialty in gastric bypass. Thank you again for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me.
We talked a lot about, in the first segment, about what the surgeries are and how they work. But I want to know what makes a good candidate? How do you know if someone is ready to have gastric bypass surgery?
That's a good question. Most patients who want to have weight loss surgery have been thinking about it, reading about it on an average for about 1 to 2 years. So my patient population are well-educated individuals who have read about it on the internet, through different articles or journals, or even talk to friends. So a lot of them come well prepared, understanding the surgery, the risk that's involved. But these individuals are at last resort. They have tried everything possible. They have tried numerous diets for long periods of time, and they have been unsuccessful. And they are developing a lot of medical problems as a result of their obesity. So number one, they have to try other modalities besides surgery first. That's the first thing. Number two, they have to meet the criteria, which is basically 100 pounds over your ideal body weight, or based on your BMI, which is probably the more common criteria, the common thing that we use to gauge if someone is a candidate.
And explain BMI for me.
The BMI is a number that is calculated based on someone's weight and based on their height. You can use a formula to calculate it, or you can use a chart. And someone has to meet the criteria of having a BMI of 40 or higher if they have no medical conditions, or if they have any medical conditions, such as asthma, diabetes, it can be lowered down to 35.
Okay, so you have a chart here to talk about how important your BMI is to the weight loss surgery, or not even to the weight loss surgery, just to your mortality in general. So can you just kind of show the camera here what you were talking about before we came on camera?
Well, when we categorize individuals based on their BMI, and you compare it to the risk of mortality, that's just without any surgery, just based on the category.
This is when somebody comes in to your office for the first time. This is one of the first things you're going to do.
So when we look at what a normal individual, and we're breaking down into 4 categories, from being normal to being overweight to being obese to being morbidly obese. The risk of mortality gets a little higher as you move up with each category, but then on this graph, as you can see, the mortality risk jumps significantly higher once you become morbidly obese. So the BMI is used as a way to gauge if someone is a candidate, but we also use it as a way to gauge if they were successful from the surgery in terms of reaching an acceptable weight loss.
Because with the surgery, they may not get from morbidly obese all the way down to what's normal. They may just get down to the obese level.
That's correct.
And that's good?
That's considered a good result from the surgery, because their mortality risk will be significantly lower to, even though it's a little bit higher compared to someone normal, it is significantly reduced now that it's more acceptable.
Okay. So just without any surgery, without anything, if someone is morbidly obese, and what is the BMI? Normal is a body mass index of? Normal
18 to 24 is considered normal.
Okay. And morbidly obese ranges from?
From anywhere from 35 or higher.
35 or higher. So if you're in that BMI, 35 or higher, and you're 100 pounds overweight, that's 2 of the criteria for gastric bypass.
Right. It could be either one.
Either one.
Either one.
So in some of these other conditions that you talked about, say someone came in and they were not 100 pounds overweight, and their BMI was not in the morbidly obese, it was in the obese range, which is
30 to 34.
30 to 34. Would they, if they had other conditions, like what are some of these other related conditions that could make them eligible for the surgery?
Unfortunately, someone who's considered obese only, their risk is not substantially elevated to justify doing the surgery.
Okay.
So the criteria that we use for someone to be a candidate are criteria that has been established by the National Institute of Health, by the American Society of Bariatric Surgeons. So all these criteria are said that these are guidelines that are already established. So someone who is only obese, their benefits from the surgery are not greatly reduced or not greatly appreciated, because the risk of going from being obese to being overweight or normal are not that substantiated to really say that you'll benefit greatly from the surgery.
For the risks of the surgery.
Correct.
So if you're morbidly obese and you're in that range, but your BMI is less than the 40 that you said, other conditions like diabetes,
high blood pressure, asthma, something what is called sleep apnea.
Okay.
If they have trouble with their cholesterol, or they have trouble with urinary incontinence, will be considered comorbid conditions that will put you in that category of being a candidate if your BMI is between 35 and 39.
Okay, so those together helped you to decide if someone is a good candidate or not.
Correct, yes.
All right, we talked about all of that, but the one question that in doing this show everybody says, the risks. People are scared. They're still scared about this surgery, and they want to know, what are the risks?
Well, everyone wants to know is, what are my chances of dying?
Right.
The mortality risk with a gastric bypass under experienced hands is 1% or less. It's about 0.5 or less with the lap band.
Okay.
So as far as other kinds of surgeries that are being performed, the risk of their surgeries, I believe, are not a lot higher. Some of them, not all of them, compared to for those of us who do bariatric surgery on a on a routine basis, are a lot higher than for us. Now, there are some surgeries that are a lot less. But in general, I think that when we consider 1% or less, I think those are pretty good. They're pretty low.
So one out of every 100 may die.
Correct.
And so, say for open heart surgery, something that, or carotid artery surgery, those are some pretty serious surgeries that
Yes.
have a lot of risks with them. How does bariatric surgery compare to something like that?
You know, again, a lot of it depends on the experience of the surgeon, but they can vary anywhere from 2 to 3%.
Okay, and the condition of the person when they go into surgery.
That's right.
All of the other conditions complicate the surgery, the asthma, the high blood pressure, all of those things complicate any surgery.
I always like to tell you a little cute story. A lot of patients do ask me, what is the chance of them dying from the surgery? And I always like to point out that on the experience sense is 1% or less, but I also like to point out that most of the surgeons who are performing back surgery or knee surgeries or whatever it may be would rather not do the surgery on the morbidly obese patients because the risks are high.
Right.
We take those individuals that no one wants to operate on because of the high risk, and we'll do it and put them through safely with less risk of dying than if they would have had the other surgery.
Because being morbidly obese puts you at a higher risk
That's
for
correct.
any surgery.
Because of the associated medical problems
Right.
that come with obesity.
Right, and so you take those patients, like you said, that nobody wants to operate on because of those risks, and you help them to hopefully get down to a weight where if they did need any further surgery for anything else, they would have hopefully better success because they were not morbidly
That's
obese
correct.
anymore. And I know that you mentioned how important it was to try all other methods of weight loss beforehand. And the reason that I'm going to say that is because we're going to talk about after surgery. There are certain things that you tell them they have to do.
That's
There
true.
are procedures and steps that people have to take that if they don't, complications can arise even after the surgery. They've come through that. So how important is it that after surgery they follow the steps and procedures?
The follow-up is very critical. That's
Okay.
the one thing that will help patients when we look at why patients fail and why patients succeed. Patients who have follow-up, who follow up with a dietitian, who follow back and see me, and who also do their part. Because patients have to be committed. This is a lifetime commitment. There's no cure for obesity. There's no, surgery is not a cure.
Okay.
Surgery is only a tool. So patients have to understand that they still have to change their ways, they still have to change their eating habits, and they still have to exercise and diet and do
Right.
their diets. Patients who would do those things get great results from the surgery. Long term, it's very critical because if patients for one reason or another fall off track or are not getting enough weight loss, we can do something about it. But patients who don't come back
Okay.
will eventually revert back to those things that they were doing before the surgery and subsequently not lose a substantial amount of weight or regain the weight back.
Because even, gastric bypass, even though they've had that or the lap band, they can still gain the weight back if they do not eat correctly and exercise.
That is true.
Because their stomach, the size of an egg, can grow.
It can stretch, or with the lap band, they can certainly eat a lot of high-calorie drinks, which means that they're consuming lots of calories and they're not really restricting it. So there's a lot of things that you can do like that where you're consuming too much calories and overriding the purpose of the surgery.
And then the band will stretch back out, or
Not necessarily that will stretch it back out, but they're just consuming more calories. The
And they
idea
need
is
to.
too much calories are going in and you're not burning it off.
so that's where the dietitian is very important.
It's very important. The follow-up is critical.
One of the things that after surgery, another graph that I have, that the related diseases like diabetes, asthma, sleep apnea, osteoarthritis, the percentages for how those things are almost cured. 95% for diabetes. After they have these surgery, 95% of people don't have diabetes, or their diabetes is under control.
Their diabetes was pretty much under control without any therapy. It's amazing to see the results of patients that once I do their surgery, and even some of them when they leave the hospital, they're no longer needing their diabetes medication.
Or their high blood pressure medicine.
That's correct. But to see them transform from an individual who is very ill with a lot of medical conditions, who is limited in their activities, in their ability to function at home or with their daily chores, and to see them slowly transform into an active and functional individual who is much healthier, it's a very rewarding and great feeling to see that.
And yes, I can imagine. So we talked about the responsibility of the patient to be successful in keeping the weight off, but everybody wants to know, how much weight is normal? How much weight am I going to lose with gastric bypass or a lap band? How much weight?
Well, that's a good question, and it varies for each one. Now realize that we're talking in the sense average. You can always have people outside the average, but as generality, people with gastric bypass can expect to lose 60 to 80% of the excess body weight, not of their total weight, of their excess body weight. Individuals with the lap band, the range is a lot longer, a lot broader. It could be anywhere from 35 to up to 65%.
And it's faster with the gastric bypass than with the lap band. You lose the weight faster.
You do. Patients can lose a lot of weight in the first 3 months. Some of them have even lost over 100 pounds in the first 3 months.
Wow. And one thing, we have just a couple more minutes, and we may use a little bit more than the half hour, but I wanted to get to, we talked all about the physical. They lose a lot of weight, there are body changes, they get to buy all the clothes that are thinner. But what happens, psychologically? How do you as a physician say to prepare somebody psychologically for the way that their body's going to change?
That's another criteria that anyone who wants to have the surgery done has to be evaluated preoperatively. One of the criteria is that everyone has to be seen by a psychologist or a psychiatrist. We want to make sure that patients who want to have the surgery done are psychologically sound, so that they are stable, because a lot of morbidly obese patients do have anxiety and do have depression. So we want to make sure that they're stable enough and that they understand what's going to be involved afterwards, so they'll be able to comply. Now, psychologically, emotionally, a lot of these patients, their self-esteem is very low before the surgery. And again, when you see that transformation, someone who doesn't seem to, they do care about themselves, but who's not really interested in a lot of different personal things, and after the surgery, their clothing that they wear, their smile,
their whole outlook on life changes.
Their self-esteem, everything changes, and it's just incredible to see them how they transform from one individual to another. So they allow that it significantly improves after surgery. Some patients' depression is completely resolved, that they don't even need any more medications.
For the depression.
That's correct.
Well, I have just a couple myths that I want to cover with you in the last minute that we have. One of the things is that people think this is a cosmetic surgery, like liposuction or a facelift, and it's far from that.
This is far from it. In my opinion, this surgery is being done to improve someone's health. It is not done to improve someone's look.
Right.
My patients are not really interested in specific looks that they have preconceived of what they want to look like afterwards. These patients are a last resort to improve health and to live longer and to see their family or grandchildren. So these patients are doing it to improve their health.
That's right. And here's one, and I want you to comment on this, because one of them is that doctors do this for the money. And you talked about how the stress level with this kind of surgery is more than any other surgery you've done. Just elaborate on that, please.
The stress level is very high because we're trying to help individuals, and this is an operation that's purely elective. This is not someone who's having cancer operation, and if you don't do it, they will die. This is an operation that you're doing it to improve their health and to make them healthier long term. But it's purely elective, meaning that there's no urgency and there's no emergency being done. So to try to take someone through an operation on an individual that's very risky, and try to do it as safely as possible with a very low mortality rate, certainly can be very, very stressful. More
than, you said you've done vascular surgery, you've done lung surgery. How do those compare with
I don't think that my stress level gets as high with any other surgery than it does with the gastric bypass. And you're right, I have done numerous of other specialty type surgeries. I think this one by far is the highest stress level. Plus, when I always like to tell my patients to do these kind of surgeries, it's a lot more costly for me to do them than it is to actually compared to any other surgery. The malpractice insurance is higher, the stress level is higher, the chances of of having any legal consequences is significantly higher compared to any other surgery.
The rewards are higher?
The rewards are higher because the gratification that patients have from this surgery is completely different. Where I may remove a gallbladder, and after 3 months they may not even remember my name.
Right.
These patients come back, and as each month goes by, they love me more and more because I've helped them a great deal, and that doesn't go away. They'll always remember me, they'll know my name even if it's 3 or 5 years later.
Well, I applaud you for that, and I thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me.
Stay with us. We're going to have 2 patients who have received bariatric surgery here with us in the next segment, and you don't want to miss it. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Healthy Living. We're discussing bariatric surgery, gastric bypass. I have with me 2 guests who have been through it. I have SheaNICKELL, a lawyer here in town and assistant Commonwealth attorney.
County attorney.
County attorney, and Sue BRESETT. I did it again, but we're not going to stop. BRESETT, I'm sorry. And both of you have been through the surgery, and we want to just start out a little bit talking about your life before the weight loss surgery. Shea, just tell me a little bit about what your life was like before.
Well, I'd always had a weight problem since I was a child. I was always a large child, and I really didn't start packing on a lot of weight, though, until I hit college and became more sedentary, getting away from sports. And in the college years, probably got up to around 400, 430. Several times I've lost 100 to 175 pounds on various diets, but always within 2 to 3 years it would slowly creep back, and even more. And you know, I never tried to allow my weight to hold me back, but it was always a struggle, because when you're packing around that much weight, it takes more energy and concentration to achieve the goals that you set for yourself. And so I faced that. Then, of course, there's the social aspects of carrying that much weight, going to a restaurant and not wanting to be sat in a booth or chairs with arms on them. A lot of things that normal-sized persons would never think of. Flying on an airplane and having to ask for extenders. Just constant reminders of your weight problem that you have to confront. And then professionally, there's the challenges that you face because so many people have preconceived ideas of overweight people that are really not accurate.
Stereotypes such as, well, they just eat too much. It's you know, if they just didn't eat that much, they wouldn't be that size.
A lot of people think that overweight people are lazy, undisciplined. Those are types of concepts that they carry. And yet, I was able to go through 7 years of college and obtain a law degree. You know, it's not about being undisciplined or being lazy. I think a lot of it has to do with DNA. A lot of it has to do with obviously lifestyle, and particularly our southern lifestyle and cooking and so forth. But a lot of weight problem comes from things that the individual really can't control. I compare it to swimming upstream. You know, you can swim against the current for a while and lose weight, but after a certain amount of time, your strength is going to leave you, and you're going to fall back, and then you have to swim upstream again. So it's constantly fighting the current of things that really you have no control over.
And then after you fought for so long, you're just tired of fighting.
It beats you down, and it works on your psyche. And a lot of people who have weight problems, who continually lose weight and regain it, develop self-image problems that they have to deal with.
Right. What about you, Sue? How was your life before the surgery?
Miserable. I hated to get up each day and get through the day. I felt so bad. it was miserable. And it's like a whole new lease on life now. Can do things that didn't even think about doing before. I go dancing. I haven't done that in years. You know, my husband and I go and do things with my kids and grandkids that I couldn't sit on the floor and play with the grandkids. Somebody'd have to help me get up. You know, now I can get out and crawl around with them. It's just great.
The little things that like you said, average-sized, weighted people don't think about.
Exactly.
And you said, you know, Shay, you kind of talked a little bit about it. You tried everything, Sue?
Everything. Every diet that's out there, I think I probably tried somewhere along the way. And we would be successful for a while, maybe even 6 months sometimes. But then gradually you just start eating the old habits again, quit exercising, gain it back plus some. You feel like you dieted yourself to the size that you got to. You think back, well, if I just hadn't dieted that first time, maybe I'd still be back at that weight.
Mm-hmm. Because it comes a little bit more each
Yes.
time.
Yes.
When did you start thinking weight loss surgery was for me? Sue?
I work at the hospital where I see them be done, and they started doing them in '03. And I watched for a year at the success, and I thought, you know what, maybe this is the remedy for my problem. I was a little afraid, but I kept watching and seeing the success and see the people would come back and show us what they'd lost, and I just decided to do it. I thought, what have I got to lose? I'm going to take years off my life. I'm going to live longer. You know, I'm not going to live to be very old at the rate I'm going, because I had a lot of medical problems. I had high blood pressure, osteoarthritis. I had back problems, all kinds of problems. I couldn't even take a tub bath. I couldn't get in and out of the bathtub.
So what was your top weight when you started?
255.
255. So your life has changed. What you said that you work with Doctor Argotte.
Yes.
And so you secretly kind of stood back in the wings a little bit and
Right.
watched what was happening.
Right. I mean, I didn't know him at all until he started doing surgeries.
Okay.
And I have great admiration for him and what he's achieved and helped other people to achieve. He really cares about his patients.
Well, we talked at the break before you came in, and he was talking about how his life has changed as well. Not just because he does the surgery and the rewards that come from helping people like yourselves, but because now he sees people who are overweight differently, and he sees the injustices that happen. He talked about being at an amusement park, and that right out in the middle, where everyone could see, they had almost like a scale where they would weigh you to see if you fit the weight limit for the ride. And he said now that he does the surgery, that really bothers him now, because how demeaning to put it right out there where everyone can see, because they're not sensitive to the subject because of all the stereotypes that are out there. So he really pays close attention to those things, and I really think that after this show, I will too. Because it's really not, like you said, it's not about how big you are, it's about who you are on the inside, and all the stereotypes cloud that. What kind of surgery did you have? We talked about gastric bypass and the lap band. What kind did you have, Shay?
I had the full gastric bypass surgery. I had it done laparoscopically in Lexington, Kentucky by Dr. Randall Bowler at Samaritan Hospital.
And when did you have it?
November 29th of 2004.
November 29th, 2004. So
Right.
just a little over a year.
About 13 or 14 months ago. My initial weight was 580 pounds, and I've lost 292 pounds. I hope to lose another 68, and my doctor tells me after I lose another 40 to 50 pounds, then we'll consider additional surgery to help me with the loose skin that I'm left with, because even though I'm working out, you just can't tighten it all up.
Well, there's just only so much you can do with the weights and all of that stuff. So you have to have a little bit of help to help you to achieve all the work that you've done.
Right.
And all of the things that you've been through. What kind did you have, Sue?
I had the open, the Roux-en-Y. The
Okay.
same kind of surgery. It's just the open.
The open.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure we kind of. He
It's
mentioned
an incision. It's not very long. It goes like from below your breastbone here to not quite above your navel a little bit. It's not that long of an incision.
And did they reroute? Did they reroute yours
Yes.
as well? And so
Yes.
yours was the malabsorption and the restrictive as well.
Yes.
Okay, so you are your stomach was shrunk down to about, like he said, maybe the size of an
About
egg.
2 ounces.
About 2 ounces. Wow. And also, it was rerouted so that the calories would not get to your stomach.
Right.
Correct.
Okay. So, we talked about the risks. What did you think when you went in and you know, that you've tried everything? I've tried everything. I've lost the weight, like you said. I've been on that roller coaster. I can't do it anymore. And you go in and they start talking about everything that's going to happen to you. What were you thinking?
Well, in my situation, my wife and I had met many years previously at Duke University on a separate diet program. We were both teaching in the Raleigh-Durham, Chapel Hill area while on the diet program at Duke, and we're both very successful, and again the weight came back later. So we had both considered the bariatric surgery, and I was to have it actually before her, but her insurance approved her prior to mine being approved, so she went ahead back into January of 2001 and underwent the open surgery in Memphis, and immediately had some severe complications from the surgery that resulted in a 9-month hospitalization, and then due to some other complications not necessarily related to the original surgery.
Negligence.
Some negligence. She passed away from it. So I was very aware of the dangers of the surgery itself, and also the other things that could happen as a result of having the surgery.
Firsthand, you knew all about it.
Right. I saw her suffer and fight and recuperate to a great extent during that 9-month period. During those 9 months, we were able to talk a lot, and I asked her several times, you know, "Hun, would you still have this done?" And she always answered absolutely, because of some of the things we talked about as far as quality of life issues. So after she passed away, I became involved with a lot of grief support groups here in the area, and actually helped teach some of those groups, and was doing everything quote unquote correctly that you do in the grieving process, but didn't realize that even at the weight that I started out, I was still feeding my grief, and put on another 150 or so pounds, got up to 580. And at that point, I had diabetes, was taking 100 units of insulin a day, together with other medications. My sleep apnea was diagnosed here locally by Dr. Hogenkamp. He told me that it was one of the worst cases he had seen.
And that's just having problems breathing at night.
Yes, you stop breathing.
You stop
actually,
breathing in your sleep.
Right, and it's very dangerous. And then the joint pain and all the other things you were talking about. My eyesight was beginning to leave because of the diabetes. So the handwriting was on the wall for me that if I didn't do something, that I didn't have long to live anyway. So when people say you must have been very brave to go ahead and have the surgery, having seen what happened to your wife, I really don't feel that way. It was just a life choice. It was either do nothing and face the obvious, which was a very short life, which would have been miserable and would have become increasingly miserable, or step out of the boat, take a walk in faith, if you will, and take a risk for a better life. And so I chose the second option. And the whole walk for me was a very faithful walk too. So I knew that if God left me here, if Jeannie was already in heaven, that I was left here, that if He had a purpose for me, that He would equip me for that purpose. And when you're carrying around that much weight, there's not a lot of good you can do, because you feel so miserable, you're just so tired all the time. So when they rolled me back, I had the perspective that I would either wake up in heaven with my wife and before my Lord, or I would wake up with the possibility of a better life. And so it was a positive choice for me. I looked forward to either one. And when I did wake up, I remember thinking about the hymn, "Great is Thy Faithfulness." there's a line in there that talks about morning by morning, new mercies I see. And ever since I've had the surgery, on almost a daily basis, there's some new mercy or some new blessing that I've seen, whether it's being able to sit in a regular chair comfortably, or ride in an airplane comfortably, or walk up a flight of stairs without being out of breath and sweating profusely, you know, in court. Those are all minor blessings that normal-sized people might not think about, but for me it was amazing that each day, even within about 2 or 3 weeks of my surgery, my eyesight had improved so much that I had to get a lesser strength eyeglasses just from the sugar coming out. So
You still take the medicine for diabetes?
no, within a month I was off of all insulin. I'm totally medicine-free now. I take 2 chewable Flintstones vitamins in the morning. I do drink some protein, liquid protein drinks, about 2 or 3 of those a day. And
For the
then watch my
malabsorption,
diet.
because you have to have the minerals and the vitamins. You do
Exactly.
that as well, Sue?
I still do protein to make sure I get plenty.
What about you? When you heard about the risks, how did you deal with that?
I decided that the outcome was worth the risk. I think my family was probably a little bit more upset and afraid than I was. I was happy going into surgery that morning.
So your husband, was he afraid?
Not really. I think it was the children more than him.
Right.
If he was, he kept it hidden.
He kept it
Maybe
hidden.
for my strength, I don't know.
And your family, your dad and your mom, Shay, were they leery of it because of your wife?
Absolutely, absolutely. But I think they saw the resolve in me that I wanted to improve my life, and they knew the struggles from having watched me over the years, and they wanted the best for me. So even though they knew the risk, you know, as with everything, you weigh the risk, count the cost, and then move forward.
Right. What, Sue? What was it like after the surgery? Well, first of all, when did you have your surgery? You had the okay.
A month after he did.
A month after, so just a little after a year, just a little more than a year for you
December
as
of
well.
04.
What was it like after the surgery? How did your life change?
Immediately after or gradual? What do you-
Immediately after to
Immediate-
start.
Oh, it hurt.
Did it hurt?
Yeah, for a few days. It was pretty miserable for the first 3 days, but that's after just
It
about
is,
any
yes.
kind of abdominal surgery.
You should ask my
is going
husband. He
to
just
be.
recently had knee surgery. It's pretty miserable even if you have
it
knee
is.
surgery. Yeah.
It is for the first few weeks, you know, but then after a couple of months, everything starts to improve. You have more energy. You feel better because you're not eating wrong anymore. You're eating right. You're eating fruits, vegetables, things that are good for you, and they actually taste good.
And I don't know if you had this experience or not, but immediately after I had the surgery, my hunger pangs were gone.
Yes.
And that's anecdotal. I don't think there's scientific explanation for it yet. I've read some articles about different theories on it, but a lot of people who have the surgery for the first time in their life, they don't feel that urge to eat.
It was actually hard for me to eat for the first few weeks.
Yeah.
Hard to drink, eat.
Well, see, and you just said that, and again, I'm playing devil's advocate with the stereotypes. But you said, well, you know, I wasn't eating wrong anymore. I was eating vegetables and I was eating fruits, and you've done that before. So,
But not long term.
But
I knew this was going to be long term.
Why did you know?
I guess because I made my mind up. And he gave me the tool to do it with. I don't have a large stomach to hold as much anymore, but I guess I could still eat wrong. But you can't eat sugar after this. It will make you dump. It will make you sick.
Okay,
So-
what does that? It make you sick? What? I
You
read
will
in the
actually
chart that I
throw
had
up.
that
You will actually throw up if you eat sugar. You just can't
Any
tolerate
sugar?
it anymore. You have to stay 5 grams or below.
Of sugar?
Of sugar, yes.
How do you, well, see, and because I read that in the chart, it said that with gastric bypass, it's called dumping, and it means
Yes.
that your body almost is intolerant of carbohydrates and sugars,
And
right?
the same thing if you eat too much. If you
Okay.
eat too much food, you're going to dump as well. You just can't hold it. It hurts. It's a terrible
So
pain.
it'll make you vomit.
For me, after the surgery, there were a number of foods that I ate constantly prior to surgery that I that no longer tasted good to me, and as you said, would make you sick. And I might try a little bit of this or a little bit of that, and it's kind of like Pavlov's dog. After the first 1 or 2 times you try and successfully, you learn to leave that alone. Before the surgery, I drank Diet Cokes from morning till night, and even they would go flat on the bedstand next to my bed. I haven't had a carbonated drink since the surgery. I did get curious one time and open one and just take a little sip, and it tasted like chemical water, which is what it is. And at first I thought, well, I liked this before. Maybe I'll just keep trying this until I relearn to like it. And then I thought, well, I've been delivered from that. I don't need to go back to that. So I basically drink water now, and maybe coffee occasionally.
Do you think that's a physical attribute of the surgery or psychological? That you just think, oh, that's bad for me, so I don't need that anymore? Or is it actually a physical?
Our dietitian tells us what to eat. If you're compliant and do what she says, you're going to lose the weight. Sodas is one of the things they say you don't do, because it blows up your pouch.
Exactly.
The carbonation,
Very uncomfortable feeling.
Very uncomfortable.
Very
It can cause ulcers in the new pouch.
And for me, after surgery, I did develop a complication that occurs in about 5%, where the esophagus, where it runs into the small stomach, healed shut with scar tissue or whatever, and so they had to go down a number of times with an instrument and dilate or expand that area with a balloon. And so for a long time, I didn't progress with the other food, and so there were several months that I couldn't eat anything other than just liquids. So I guess during that time I just lost the taste for a lot of it, or the desire.
Kind of like smoking. Once you quit, if you kind of pick up another one, you kind of get that dizzy, lightheaded feeling again, because your body has gotten rid of that. So if you pick up a soda or anything like that, your body almost can't tolerate it anymore without the side effects that come along with that.
Your taste definitely changes. I mean, I used to love sweets, and fruit's taken the place.
So you used to like
Healthy.
candy and chips and all. So you don't eat any of that now?
No.
You have no desire to?
No.
See, because I've said this on a few shows. I've lost 35 pounds, and
Very good.
I don't have that, Sue. I still want the chocolate. I still want it. I still crave it, and sometimes I still have to have it. And so for you not to even crave it or want it,
I still want chocolate.
Oh,
but
okay.
I have a chocolate protein drink that I love.
Oh, so you just replace it. You just replace it with the protein drink with something else.
One of the wild things for me was after the surgery, of course recuperating at home, I got to watching the food channels, because I got involved with the preparation of the food, and occasionally I would think to myself, what I would like to just get a bite of that to see what that tastes like, because it seemed interesting, but there was not the desire, the urge. Beforehand, when I was on another diet at Duke University, one of the doctors told me that larger people would have been the healthy people in the Stone Age because of our body chemistry, DNA, and so forth. But in today's society, fast food, running everywhere and just eating quickly, we're the ones that are unhealthy. But I still enjoy watching food prepared. I enjoy going out with friends, and they can eat lobster with butter and everything right beside me, but it really doesn't bother me at all. I'll just pick and choose what I can eat.
So really, it's giving you a whole new outlook, because with the weight gone, now it's like you have a head start on that. You can maintain it versus that uphill battle that you talked about, Shay, about swimming upstream, of trying to lose it all to get to where you are now. So now you're there, and now maintaining it is easier than trying to lose it. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think it's fair.
I watch Al Roker a lot on the network television. And a few weeks ago there were reports that he had put back a little bit of weight and had to go back on a diet, and so he was an inspiration to me, and I watched him, and then other people locally who'd have it. I still have a fear. I still fear going back, and I try to harness that and make it useful. But I have lost a significant amount before and put it back on, never this much. But And I think that prevents me from trying to stretch the stomach. You know, you can only stretch it so much, but I don't want to go back to where I was, and so I'm very cautious.
Well, we talked about that at the break. Sue, you said that you have that fear as well.
I fear every day that I'll get heavy again.
You're scared.
But it's always been the case. You lost the pounds, but you gained them back. So naturally, you're going to fear that you're going to get heavy again.
Well, we were talking about that in losing weight. You see someone you haven't seen in a long time, and there aren't even any words. Nobody says anything. It's just this look on their face that they're amazed that you look so much thinner, and then it starts to become a psychological thing. That fear. I don't want to put the weight back on because initially I lost it for my health. I lost it because my sugar was a little bit high, and I lost it for that reason. But then everybody starts talking about how great you look. And then it becomes, it's up here. I'm afraid because I don't want to see that look that you get without the words again. Oh, you've put on the weight again. And nobody has to say anything. You can just see the look. And so you have that fear that it may happen again. And so that kind of keeps you on track? Or how do you deal with it?
I don't have the fear of what other people will think. I just have the fear that I won't be healthy like I am now.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't want to go back on 3 blood pressure medications a day.
So you're off your medications?
I'm off of everything.
You
I
had
take
high blood
vitamins.
pressure?
Osteoarthritis.
And you
Yeah,
took
back
medications?
problems, yeah. Nothing hurts anymore.
Wow.
It's great.
That is great.
And I'm not a youngster anymore, so not many people can say that.
Well, don't you feel younger?
Oh, yeah,
though?
I do.
And you get that all the time from your friends. They say,
yeah.
oh, you look so much younger, and you feel so much younger. It's like you want to go back and make up for the last 20 or 30 years.
My children say, Mom, you look so happy now. We've never seen you smile.
Wow. And that's a statement, isn't it? That's a real testament to what you've done. One last question. And you've changed your life. You changed your eating habits. You said you exercise all the time. You have made the commitment that it takes. This isn't just a quick fix. I mean, this is a commitment. You have to say a lifetime commitment. I'm going to get this fresh start that this surgery has given you. You met the criteria. How important is the psychological aspect? The physical is one thing. How important is it emotionally? Sue?
It's very important. I mean, my self-esteem was terrible before. I had none. I mean, I feel good now when I go shop for clothes and how they look. I feel confident when I go somewhere now to a function, to a wedding. Before I wanted to sit in the back. Now I want to be right up front.
That's great. What about you, Shay? Emotionally?
If you feel good, I think the mental outlook has to follow suit, and you're not perhaps afraid to take on some other challenges or take other risks since you've accomplished this goal, and you feel, like I said, you feel better, you have more energy. Your friends are so important, your family and friends, their encouragement. I love it when I walk into a room and someone who hasn't seen me for quite a while doesn't recognize me.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. I don't say that pridefully, but thankfully. So your friends and family are great support. You do have to take a psychological test before you have the surgery to make sure that you'll follow through with it. And but it's the whole person. It's not just the physical. It's the physical, the mental, and the spiritual preparation that you have to go through.
Well, I appreciate you joining me, and I think that you have helped a lot of people out there who've already had the surgery and are having to have this commitment every day like you have, and those who are thinking about having it. Weigh the risks versus the benefits. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining me on this edition of Healthy Living. If you have any comments or future show topics that you'd like to share with me, call me at 270-534-3215 or email me at tammy.thompson@kctcs.edu. We'll see you next time on Healthy Living.